The Valkorian Empire had ruled the stars for over 1,000 years. Their ships were fast and deadly. Their weapons could burn entire cities to ash in seconds. Their soldiers stood 7 feet tall, covered in thick green scales that could stop most bullets. They had conquered 17 star systems, and every species they met had either surrendered or died. High Commander. Zolrath sat in his command chair aboard the massive warship Dominion, studying reports about a new species his scouts had discovered. They called themselves humans. They came from a small blue planet called Earth in an unimportant corner of the galaxy. Their technology was primitive. Their military fleet had only 200 ships. Their bodies were soft and weak, with no natural armor, no claws, no venom. Zolrath clicked his mandibles together in amusement. This would be the easiest conquest yet. The humans had recently built their first colonies on other worlds. They were like children taking their first steps, unaware of the dangers waiting in the darkness between stars. Zolrath decided he would teach them a lesson they would never forget. On the human colony world of Kepler 4-4b, 18,000 people lived in a peaceful settlement called New Haven. They had built farms and schools and hospitals. Children played in parks under an alien sky. Families sat down to dinner together, talking about their hopes and dreams for this new world. Linda Morrison was visiting the colony as Earth's ambassador to the outer settlements. She was 63 years old, with gray hair and sharp blue eyes that had seen much in her long career. She stood on the balcony of the governor's mansion, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" said Governor Samuel Price, a kind man in his 50s who had worked hard to build this community. Linda smiled. "It gives me hope for our future." That was when the sky turned to fire. Valkorian warships appeared without warning, dropping out of faster-than-light travel directly above the colony. There was no communication, no demand for surrender, no warning at all. They simply opened fire. Linda watched in horror as plasma beams rained down from the sky. Buildings exploded. Streets melted. People ran screaming, but there was nowhere to run. The Valkorian ships moved in perfect formation, systematically destroying everything below them. Governor Price grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the emergency bunker. "We have to go now." They ran through chaos. Smoke filled the air. The ground shook with each new explosion. Linda saw a mother clutching her children, saw an old man trying to help his injured wife, saw young soldiers firing uselessly at ships they could not reach. The bunker doors sealed behind them just as the mansion was destroyed. Linda and a handful of survivors huddled in the darkness, listening to their world die above them. When rescue ships finally arrived 3 days later, they found Linda sitting alone in the ruins. The bunker had protected a few dozen survivors out of 18,000. Governor Price had died when a secondary explosion collapsed part of the shelter. Linda had not cried. She had not screamed. She had simply sat in the ashes and waited, her mind working through what she would do next. The Valkorians had broadcast a message across all human frequencies. It was simple and arrogant. "You will surrender all your worlds and colonies to the Valkorian Empire. You will serve us as slaves. If you refuse, every human settlement will burn like this one. You have 1 month to respond." The message was accompanied by footage of New Haven's destruction, edited to show the most terrible moments of suffering. Back on Earth, people watched in shock and grief. Some called for immediate surrender. "Better to live as slaves than die as free people," they said. The Valkorians were too powerful. Humanity could not win, but something else was happening too. In military bases around the world, soldiers volunteered for service in numbers not seen since the great wars of the past. In laboratories, scientists worked through the night, studying captured Valkorian technology and planning improvements. In factories, production lines switched from making consumer goods to making weapons. Humanity was not surrendering. Humanity was getting angry. 2 weeks after the attack, Linda Morrison stood before the Galactic Council. This was a gathering of representatives from dozens of alien species, most of whom had lived in fear of the Valkorians for generations. They expected the human ambassador to beg for help, or perhaps to announce surrender. They were wrong. Linda walked to the center of the chamber with steady steps. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with cold fire. Behind her, holographic images showed the destruction of New Haven. The bodies of children lying in the streets, the message of arrogant demands. Came to the stars in peace, Linda began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. We sought friendship and trade with all species. We threatened no one. We asked only to be left alone to build our future. Looking directly at High Commander Zoloth, who sat among the council delegates with an expression of bored contempt. The Valkorian Empire answered our friendship with fire. They murdered 18,000 innocent people, including children, and demanded that we become their slaves. They believe we are weak because we are small. They believe we will break because we are soft. Linda's voice grew harder, colder. They have studied our radio transmissions. They have seen our history. They know that we have spent 10,000 years fighting and killing each other over land, over resources, over ideas. They know that we have invented weapons capable of destroying our own world, and that we came close to using them more than once. She took a step toward Zorath. But they did not understand what they were seeing. They saw a violent species and thought us primitive. They did not realize that our violence has made us survivors. They did not realize that every war has taught us new ways to kill, new strategies, new technologies. They did not realize that we are still here after everything we have done to ourselves, because we refused to die. The chamber was completely silent. You have attacked our families, Linda said, her voice rising. You have murdered our children. You have threatened our home. And you expect us to surrender? She almost laughed. High Commander Zolrath, you have made the worst mistake of your long and bloody career. You have awakened something you do not understand. You have united a species that has never been united before. You have given us a common enemy and a reason to use every terrible skill we have developed over thousands of years of warfare. Linda straightened her spine and spoke her final words with absolute certainty. You just declared war on the deadliest species alive, and we accept. She turned and walked out of the chamber without waiting for a response. Behind her, Zolrath felt the first cold touch of doubt enter his heart. He had conquered many species, but none of them had ever looked at him like that. None of them had ever smiled. On Earth, the preparations for war continued. Ships were built. Soldiers were trained. Scientists made breakthroughs that should have taken decades. And in every city, in every home, people made a simple promise to each other. We will not forget New Haven. We will not surrender. We will make them pay for every life they took. The Valkorians wanted war. They were about to learn what that meant when humans were the enemy. 6 months had passed since the destruction of New Haven. The Valkorian expected to find a broken enemy, scattered and afraid, ready to accept defeat. Instead, they found something that confused and disturbed them. The humans were not breaking. They were getting stronger. High Commander Zolrath reviewed the reports from the front lines with growing unease. His invasion fleet had moved toward Earth with absolute confidence, expecting easy victories. The first battles had gone as planned. Human ships were destroyed. Human stations were captured. Human soldiers died by the thousands, but the humans did not surrender. They did not even slow down. For every ship the Valkorians destroyed, 2 more appeared. For every soldier they killed, 10 more volunteered to take their place. Human factories worked day and night, producing weapons at a rate that should have been impossible. Human scientists studied captured Valkorian technology and improved it within weeks. And the humans fought in ways the Valkorians had never seen before. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the carrier Valor, watching his tactical displays fill with enemy signatures. He was 42 years old, a career military officer who had spent his life preparing for a war he hoped would never come. Now that it was here, he felt a strange calm settle over him. 63 Valkorian warships approaching. Captain, reported Lieutenant Karen White, his tactical officer. She was young, barely 25, but her voice was steady. Standard attack formation. They outnumber us 3-1. Daniel nodded slowly. They still haven't learned. The Valkorians expected their enemies to retreat from superior numbers. Every species they had conquered had followed the same pattern. When outnumbered, run. When cornered, surrender. Survival was the most basic instinct of all living things. Humans were different. All ships execute attack pattern Delta, Daniel ordered. Full speed ahead, weapons free. The human fleet did not retreat. It accelerated directly into the Valkorian formation. Guns blazing, missiles flying, pilots screaming war cries into their communications channels. It was insane. It was suicidal. It was absolutely terrifying to the Valkorians who faced it. The battle lasted for hours. When it was over, 41 Valkyrian ships had been destroyed. The humans lost 32, but they held the field. More importantly, they had shown the enemy something crucial. Humans were willing to die. Not just willing, but eager. Pilots rammed their damaged fighters into enemy bridges. Soldiers charged fortified positions with nothing but rifles and grenades. Ship captains stayed at their posts while their vessels burned around them, fighting until the last moment. The Valkorians had never faced anything like this. Their conquests had always been easy, because other species valued survival above all else. Humans seemed to value something more. On Earth, the war effort consumed everything. Schools closed, so their buildings could become hospitals. Factories that once made cars now made tanks. Every person contributed something. From the oldest grandmother, knitting socks for soldiers, to the youngest child collecting scrap metal for recycling, Dr. Maria Santos worked in a laboratory deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. She was 61 years old, a grandmother of 4, and one of the most brilliant biologists on Earth. Before the war, she had studied plants. She had won awards. For her work on sustainable agriculture now, she designed weapons. Maria had not slept more than 3 hours a night since New Haven. Her daughter lived on one of the colony worlds that might be next on the Valkorian target list. Her grandchildren might grow up as slaves if humanity lost this war. That thought kept her working when her body screamed for rest. The neural toxin is ready, she announced to her team. It targets Valkorian brain chemistry specifically. It will not affect humans or any other known species. Her assistant, a young man named Peter Cruz, looked at her with something like, "Dr. Santos, this could kill millions of them." Maria met his eyes without flinching. "Yes, it could. And if it saves my grandchildren from slavery, I will live with that." She had become something she'd never imagined she could be. War did that to people. It stripped away the comfortable lies they told themselves and revealed what they were truly capable of across the planet. Similar transformations were happening. Teachers became soldiers. Artists became spies. Farmers became resistance fighters. Humanity was discovering its hidden strengths. The survival instincts that had been dormant for generations of peace. Admiral Gregory Palmer commanded the combined human fleet from his flagship, the Endeavour. He was 68 years old, a veteran of 3 minor conflicts, and he had never expected to fight a war for the survival of his entire species. He stood before a holographic display showing the current state of the war. Blue dots represented human forces. Red dots represented Valkorians. There were far more red dots than blue, sir. "The enemy fleet is advancing on Mars colony," reported his communications officer, a woman named Helen Grant. "They'll arrive in 6 hours." Gregory studied the display carefully. Mars colony held 2 million people. If it fell, the Valkorians would have a staging point for an assault on Earth itself. "Order the 3rd Fleet to intercept," he said. "Tell Admiral Collins to hold them at any cost." He knew what that order meant. The 3rd Fleet was outnumbered badly. Many of those ships would not return. But that was the nature of this war. Every day was a choice between terrible options. Later that night, Gregory addressed the entire human fleet via broadcast. His face appeared on screens throughout the solar system, in ships and stations and bunkers where soldiers waited for their next battle. "I will not lie to you," he said. "The enemy is stronger than us. They have more ships, more weapons, more experience, By all logic, we should have lost this war already. Paused, letting his words sink in. But we are still here. We are still fighting. And the enemy is beginning to understand something that we have always known. Humans do not give up. Humans do not surrender. Humans have been fighting and killing each other for 10,000 years, and we have become very, very good at it. His voice hardened with determination. The Valkorians thought we would be an easy conquest. They were wrong. They thought they could break us with terror and violence. They were wrong. They thought they knew what war meant. They were wrong about that too. Gregory leaned forward, his eyes burning with fierce resolve. We will teach them. We will show them what human beings do when their families are threatened. We will make them regret the day they ever heard of Earth. And when this war is over, when we have one, the galaxy will know that humanity is not to be challenged. Straightened and delivered his final words. Today, we take the war to them. Good hunting. Across the human fleet, soldiers cheered. On Earth, families watched and wept and felt something they had not felt in months. Hope the Valkorians had expected an easy victory. They were beginning to realize their mistake. Humanity was not a sleeping lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Humanity was a sleeping dragon, and it had finally awakened. The real war was just beginning. 1 year into the war, the Galactic Council began to understand their mistake. They had watched the conflict from a safe distance, expecting it to end quickly. The Valkorians always won. That was simply how things worked. Smaller species surrendered or died, and the empire grew larger. But the humans refused to follow the script. Ambassador, Crix of the Malari Collective, sat in the council chamber, reviewing intelligence reports with growing amazement. The Malari had surrendered to the Valkorians 3 centuries ago. They served as administrators and bureaucrats for the Empire, too useful to destroy, but too weak to fight back. Crix had never imagined any species could stand against Valkorian power. The humans were not just standing. They were winning battles. How is this possible? Crix asked the Council's military advisor. Their technology is inferior. Their numbers are smaller. They should have been destroyed within the first month. The advisor, a thin creature from a species that specialized in analysis, spread its tentacles in the gesture that meant uncertainty. The humans are ... different. They adapt faster than any species we have recorded. They learn from every defeat and change their tactics. And they have psychological characteristics we do not fully understand, such as they do not value survival above all else. They will sacrifice themselves for abstract concepts like honor, duty, and revenge. This makes them unpredictable and extremely dangerous. On a distant Valkorian world called Korath, Commander Patricia Bell led the first human special operations mission deep into enemy territory. Her team consisted of 12 soldiers, each one selected for their unique skills. They had spent months training for this moment. Patricia was 40 years old. Before the war, she had been a school teacher in a small town in Ohio. She had taught history to 6th graders, coached the girls' basketball team, and spent her weekends gardening. She had never imagined she would become a soldier, but war changed people. When the Valkorians attacked, Patricia discovered something inside herself that she had never known existed. She was good at violence. She was good at planning. She was good at making hard decisions without hesitation. "Team, we are 10 minutes from the target," she whispered into her communication device. "Remember, our mission is to eliminate the regional governor. No witnesses. No evidence." Her soldiers moved through the alien city like shadows. They wore stolen Valkorian cloaking technology that human scientists had improved far beyond its original capability. To any sensor, they were invisible. To any eye, they were ghosts. Sergeant Tony Martinez was Patricia's second-in-command. He was a former gang member from Los Angeles who had found purpose and discipline in the military. His hands were steady as he positioned his rifle on a rooftop overlooking the governor's palace. "I have the target in sight," he reported. "Waiting for your order?" Patricia studied the palace through her own scope. The governor was a brutal creature who had ordered the destruction of 2 human colony ships, killing thousands of civilians. He had boasted about it in public broadcasts, showing footage of screaming humans being blown into space. Patricia felt nothing but cold purpose. Take the shot. The governor died before he heard the sound. His guards rushed to protect him, but there was nothing to protect against. The humans were already gone, melting back into the shadows, leaving nothing behind but fear. Across the galaxy, similar operations unfolded on the same night. Human infiltrators struck at Velkorian leadership, military installations, and communication centers. They left no evidence, no witnesses, only terror and confusion. The Velkorians had never faced guerrilla warfare before. Their conquests had always been straightforward military campaigns. Destroy the enemy fleet, capture the enemy worlds, rule the conquered population. Simple. Humans did not fight simply. They fought dirty. They used ambushes and traps. They turned the enemy's own technology against them. They struck from shadows and disappeared before anyone could respond. They were everywhere and nowhere at the same time. High Commander Zolrath received reports of the attacks with growing rage. How can they do this? He demanded of his advisors. We destroyed their scouts, their spy ships. How are they operating on our worlds? No one had an answer. The humans seemed to appear from thin air, strike their targets, and vanish completely. It was like fighting smoke. In response, Zolrath ordered increased brutality. 3 more human colonies were destroyed. Millions of civilians died. He broadcast footage of the destruction across all frequencies, expecting the humans to finally break. Instead, human recruitment offices were helmed with volunteers. Every atrocity only strengthened their resolve. Dr. Christopher Blake was a psychologist who had been assigned to study Velkorian prisoners. He spent hours interviewing captured enemy soldiers, trying to understand their mindset. What he learned disturbed him deeply. They don't understand us, he reported to military command. They see our grief and think it is weakness. They see our rage and think it will make us careless. They do not understand that human emotions make us stronger, not weaker, showed recordings of his interviews to the generals. When I asked one prisoner why they attacked New Haven without warning, he said it was obvious. A quick show of force always breaks enemy morale. That is how it works with every species they have. Conquered. Christopher shook his head in amazement. He genuinely could not understand why we didn't surrender after they murdered 18,000 civilians. He kept asking me what was wrong with us. He said normal species give up when they realize they cannot win. Andrel Amanda Stone, the commanding officer of Earth's Defense Forces, smiled grimly. And what did you tell him? I told him that humans are not normal. I told him that we have spent our entire history fighting against impossible odds. I told him that surrender is not in our nature and neither is forgetting. Every person they killed has a family that will never stop fighting. Every atrocity creates 1,000 new enemies. The general nodded slowly. Did he understand? No, I don't think he can. The Velkorians have been conquerors for so long that they have forgotten what it means to fight for survival. They have forgotten what desperation looks like. She leaned forward with intensity. We have not forgotten. We never will. On the front lines, the war continued to shift. Human forces were still outnumbered, still outgunned, but they were no longer losing ground. Every battle taught them something new. Every defeat made them stronger. Every victory gave them hope. The Velkorians had expected a quick conquest. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a nightmare that grew worse every day. Their enemies would not die. Their enemies would not surrender. Their enemies adapted to every strategy and developed counters faster than seemed possible, and somewhere deep in the human military command structure. Plans were being made for something the Velkorians never imagined: an invasion. Humanity was no longer just defending its home. Humanity was preparing to take the war to the enemy's doorstep, to show the Velkorians what human beings were truly capable of when they had nothing left to lose. The deadliest species alive was just getting started. 18 months after the first attack on New Haven, the impossible happened. Human ships appeared in the sky above Velkoria Prime, the homeworld of the Empire that had terrorized the galaxy for 1,000 years. For the first time in their long history, the Velkorians looked up and saw an enemy fleet descending toward their cities. High Commander Zolrath stood in the war room of his planetary defense center, watching his displays with disbelief. This could not be happening. The humans were supposed to be weak. The humans were supposed to be primitive. The humans were supposed to surrender. Instead, they had crossed hundreds of light years, destroyed 3 defensive fleets, and now threatened the very heart of the Empire. How many ships? Zolrath demanded. His tactical officer was shaking, something Valkorians rarely did. Over 500, High Commander, and more are arriving every hour. 500 ships. When the war began, humanity had only 200. In 18 months, they had built an invasion fleet larger than anything Zolrath had ever seen. But it was not the numbers that terrified him most. It was the knowledge of what those ships carried. Human soldiers. Colonel Ruth Andrews commanded the ground assault from a dropship descending toward the Valkorian capital city. She was 53 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines on her face that had not been there 2 years ago. She had lost her husband and both sons at New Haven, was killed in the first seconds of the attack. She had not cried since that day. She had not slept well either. She had simply worked, trained, fought, and waited for this moment. All units prepare for landing, she announced over the battalion frequency. Remember our mission. Capture government buildings. Secure communication centers. Neutralize military leadership. She paused, then added words that meant everything to her soldiers. And remember New Haven. Remember why we fight. The dropships hit atmosphere, and the real battle began. Valkorian anti-aircraft weapons filled the sky with fire. Ships exploded. Soldiers died. But the humans kept coming, wave after wave. Unstoppable in their determination. Ruth's ship landed hard in a plaza near the central government complex. She was first out the door, rifle raised, eyes scanning for threats. Her soldiers followed, spreading out with practiced precision. A Valkorian warrior charged from a doorway, standing 7 feet tall with scales like armor and claws that could tear through metal. Ruth shot him 3 times in the face without hesitation.
Ow, move.
She ordered, "We don't stop until the flag is down." Throughout the city, similar scenes unfolded. Human soldiers fought through streets designed for creatures twice their size. They cleared buildings room by room, floor by floor. They faced enemies with natural weapons that should have made close combat suicide. They won anyway. Private. Lisa Chen was 19 years old, barely out of basic training. She had joined the military the day after her 18th birthday, despite her parents' objections. Now she crouched behind a burned-out vehicle, watching 2 Valkorian soldiers approach her position. Her rifle was empty. Her squad was dead. She should have been terrified. Instead, she pulled a knife from her belt and waited. The first Valkorian died with the blade in his throat before he knew she was there. The second swung at her with claws that could have cut her in half, but Lisa was already moving. Ducking under his arm and driving her knife into the gap between his scales, she stood over their bodies. Breathing hard, covered in blood that was not her own. "That's for my brother," she said quietly. Her brother had been on one of the colony ships the Valkorians destroyed, Dr. Christopher Blake. Accompanied the invasion force as an advisor. His job was to help human commanders understand Valkorian psychology, to predict how the enemy would respond to different situations. What he saw in Valkoria Prime fascinated and disturbed him. The Valkorians did not know how to fight a defensive war. For generations, they had only attacked. They had forgotten how to retreat, how to regroup, how to survive against a superior enemy. Their tactics were designed for conquest, not defense. Humans, on the other hand, had spent their entire history fighting each other. They had experience with every type of warfare imaginable. Offense, defense, guerrilla tactics, siege warfare, urban combat, everything. They adapted to new situations with a speed that seemed impossible to their enemies. "It's actually quite logical," Christopher explained to Colonel Andrews during a brief pause in the fighting. "We have been at war with ourselves for 10,000 years. We have had time to make every mistake and learn from it. The Valkorians have been winning for so long that they have forgotten how to learn.
Oh, dude. Right, dude.
Their loss, literally. By the end of the first day, Human forces controlled most of the capital city. The planetary government had fled to a bunker complex in the mountains, but they were surrounded. It was only a matter of time. High Commander Zolrath sat in that bunker, listening to reports of defeat after defeat. His world was falling. His empire was crumbling. Everything he had built was being destroyed by creatures he had dismissed as primitive animals. "We should surrender," one of his advisors suggested carefully. "The humans have offered terms. If we accept now, we might save something." Zolrath wanted to execute the advisor for cowardice, but he knew the suggestion made sense. The war was lost. Continuing to fight would only increase the destruction, but surrender was not in Valkorian nature. They had been predators for too long. They did not know how to submit to another species. "No," Zolrath said. "We fight until the end." His advisor bowed and retreated. Zolrath turned back to his displays, watching the human advance continue. On the surface, Ruth Andrews received word of the enemy's decision. She had hoped they would surrender. She had lost too many soldiers already, and the fighting would only get worse from here. But she was not surprised. The Valkorians were proud. They would rather die than admit defeat. "Fine," she said quietly. "We'll do this the hard way." She called for reinforcements and prepared for the assault on the mountain bunker. It would be bloody. It would be costly. But it would end this war once and for all. As night fell on Valkoria Prime, human soldiers made camp and conquered government buildings. They ate rations and tended wounds and tried to sleep despite the sounds of distant fighting. They were exhausted and far from home, but they were winning. Private Lisa Chen sat alone in a corner, cleaning her knife with shaking hands. The adrenaline was fading, and the reality of what she had done was setting in. She had killed 2 beings today. She had looked into their eyes as they died. An older soldier sat down beside her. Sergeant Marcus Wright was 40 years old. A veteran of the early battles, who had somehow survived everything the Valkorians threw at him. "First time?" he asked gently. Lisa nodded, not trusting her voice. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "It never gets easier. Anyone who tells you different is lying. But it does get more manageable. You learn to carry it." He looked at her with understanding. "You did what you had to do. You survived. That's all anyone can ask." Lisa finally found her voice. "I keep thinking about my brother. He never had a chance to fight back. They just killed him and everyone else on that ship." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's why we're here. So no one else has to die like that. So our families are safe." Lisa looked at her knife, then at the sergeant. "Is it worth it? All of this?" Marcus considered the question carefully before answering. "Ask me again when we win." Outside, the stars shone down on a conquered world. Humanity had come to the heart of enemy territory and planted their flag in the ashes of empire. The war was not over yet. Everyone knew how it would end. The deadliest species alive had proven worthy of the title too. Years after the attack on New Haven, the war ended. The surrender ceremony took place aboard a human diplomatic vessel called Olive Branch. Floating in orbit above Valkoria Prime, representatives from dozens of species had come to witness this historic moment. The Valkorian Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for 1,000 years, was about to officially acknowledge defeat. High Commander Zolrath walked slowly toward the ceremonial chamber. He had been captured 3 months earlier, when human forces finally broke through his mountain bunker. Since then, he had been held in surprisingly comfortable custody. Treated with respect he had never shown his own prisoners. He did not understand these humans. He had studied them for 2 years, fought them, lost to them. He still did not understand them. The chamber doors opened, and Zolrath stepped inside. Standing at the far end was the woman he remembered from the Galactic Council meeting. The one who had promised war with such cold certainty. Linda Morrison had changed. Her hair was completely white now, and there were deep lines around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy burdens, but her gaze was still the same. Steel and fire, and something else he could not name. Linda had been appointed Secretary General of the United Earth Government 6 months into the war. She had led humanity through its darkest hours, and its greatest victories. Now she would lead them into peace. "High Commander Zolrath," she said formally, "you are here to sign the Articles of Surrender on behalf of the Valkorian Empire. Do you understand the terms?" Zolrath nodded. He had read the terms many times. They were harsh, but not cruel. The Valkorian military would be reduced to defensive forces only. The Empire would pay reparations to every species it had wronged. Conquered worlds would be given independence. War criminals would face trial. But there was nothing about destruction, nothing about enslavement, nothing about revenge. "I understand," he said, "but I do not understand why." Linda tilted her head slightly. "Why what? Why do you not destroy us?" Zolrath asked. "We murdered your people. We burned your colonies. We tried to enslave your entire species. By any measure of justice, you should wipe us from existence." It was a question he had been asking since his capture. None of the humans had given him a satisfactory answer. Linda was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. "Because we are not you." She stepped closer, looking up at the creature that towered over her. "We fought this war to protect our families, not to become monsters. If we destroyed your people, we would become exactly what we fought against. Our children would inherit a galaxy built on genocide and hatred. That is not the future we want." Zolrath struggled to process her words. In Valkorian culture, mercy was weakness. Sparing an enemy meant leaving a threat alive. It made no logical sense to show compassion to those who had shown none. "You believe we can change?" he asked. "After everything we have done?" Linda considered the question carefully. "I believe everyone deserves a chance to choose a different path. What you do with that chance is up to you." She extended her hand, a gesture her aides had explained to the Valkorians. It meant peace, reconciliation, a new beginning. Zolrath looked at that small, soft hand. It belonged to a creature he had once considered prey. Now it offered him something no Valkorian had ever received from a conquered. Forgiveness. He reached out and took her hand. The signing ceremony was brief. Documents were presented, signatures were recorded, and the Valkorian Empire officially ceased to exist. In its place would rise something new, something that would have to find a different way to exist among the stars. Across the galaxy, the news spread instantly. Species that had lived in fear for centuries celebrated their freedom. Former slave worlds declared independence. Prisoners were released. Families were reunited, and on Earth, humanity celebrated its greatest victory. In a small town in Kansas, an old man named William Porter sat on his porch and watched the news feeds. He was 92 years old, a veteran of wars that seemed small compared to what humanity had just survived. He had worried constantly about his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, afraid they would not live to see adulthood. Now, they had a future. His great-granddaughter Sophie ran onto the porch, her face bright with excitement. "Grandpa, did you see? We won. The war is over." William smiled and pulled her into a hug. "I saw, sweetheart. I saw." Sophie was only 8 years old. She did not fully understand what the war had meant, what had been sacrificed, how close humanity had come to extinction. She only knew that the bad aliens had been defeated and everything would be okay. Now, William hoped she would never have to understand more than that. That evening, Dr. Maria Santos received a call from her daughter on one of the colony worlds. Her grandchildren appeared on the screen, alive and safe, talking excitedly about the victory celebrations happening on their planet. Maria listened and smiled and felt something loosen in her chest. For 2 years, she had carried the weight of what she had done, the weapons she had created, the deaths she had caused. She had told herself it was necessary, and it was, but that did not make it easier. Now, watching her grandchildren laugh and play, she understood why she had made those choices. This was what she had protected. This was what she had fought for. The war was over, but its effects would last for generations. Humanity had proven itself the deadliest species alive, and that reputation would follow them across the galaxy. Some species would fear them. Others would seek their protection. All would remember what humans were capable of when pushed to the edge. 5 years after the surrender, Ambassador Dennis Cole stood before the Galactic Council. He was young for such an important position, only 45, but humanity had lost many of its senior diplomats in the war. New leaders had risen to fill the gaps. "We did not choose to become the deadliest species alive," Dennis said to the assembled delegates. "We became so because we had no other choice. The Velcorians attacked us without warning and without mercy. They expected us to surrender or die. They did not understand that humans do neither." He paused, looking around the chamber at dozens of alien faces. "But we choose now and always to use our strength in service of peace. We have no desire for empire. We have no wish to conquer. We want only to live among the stars in harmony with all species who respect our right to exist." His voice hardened slightly. "Threaten us, and we will destroy you. That is not a boast. That is a promise. We have proven what we can do when our families are in danger." Then his expression softened. "But befriend us, and we will stand beside you against any enemy. We will trade with you fairly. We will share our knowledge freely. We will be the allies you can always depend on." He spread his hands in a gesture of openness. "The choice has always been yours." On Earth, in that same small town in Kansas, Sophie Porter was now 13 years old. She sat on her grandmother's porch, looking up at the stars with wonder rather than fear. Maria Santos, now retired from weapons research and returned to her beloved plants, sat beside her. Grandma Sophie asked, "Why do the aliens call us the deadliest species?" Maria was quiet for a moment, remembering the war, the fear, the rage, and finally the peace. She remembered the weapons she had built and the people they had killed. She remembered the celebrations when the war ended and the quiet tears she had shed alone afterward. "Because when we love something," she said softly, pulling her granddaughter close, "nothing in the universe can stop us from protecting it." Sophie leaned against her grandmother, feeling safe and warm and loved above them. The stars continued their ancient dance. Somewhere among those distant lights, human ships patrolled the borders of explored space, protecting colonies and trade routes and the future of their species. They were warriors without equal, but they fought for peace. Humanity had taken its place among the stars, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as something new, guardians of a future worth fighting for, and the galaxy would never forget. What they had proven in the fires of war. When you threaten human beings, when you attack their families, when you try to destroy everything they love, you do not break them. You only make them stronger. That was the lesson the Velcorians had learned too late. That was the lesson that would echo through history for generations to come. Never declare war on humans. They are the deadliest species alive, and they never, ever give up.